There's a big lobby happening right now with the government working on this issue. Another thing which the Catechetical Commission worked on that I think is interesting is the programs for migrant children and youth that they've developed. And the way that this came about, Sister Luisa, who's pictured at the top of the screen, she's the head of the commission, traveled to Italy, Spain, Portugal, and she met with migrant communities which are located there. And they had meetings, they talked about their problems and about the different issues that they're struggling with. And the one issue that kept coming up was the children, and that the children are suffering. A lot of times they're overlooked, they don't have the community that they need. And so what Sister Luisa did was she organized first training for catechists who will be able to have programs for the children, Sunday programs on location, on these migrant locations. The second thing that she did was she began to organize summer camps in Spain, where the migrant children could all come together, form a community. They would spend time together, both catechesis and also it's like a vacation Bible camp. And the third initiative that Sister Luisa organized is a program she calls Children to Children. And it's where they take the finalists of a religious song competition that they do in Ukraine. And they take these finalists and they travel to the migrant locations, they do concerts, and they meet with the local migrant children as well. So those are some good examples, I think, of both cooperation with the state and also, again, this element of analyzing what the situation is and trying to figure out what is the best solution to the problems that exist on the ground. The next commission that I just wanted to mention very briefly is the Migrant Commission. And I think this is an issue that is close to almost every Ukrainian family in Ukraine. Everybody is touched in one way or another by the issue of migration. There's a lot of problems with migration, starting with being unsure of your destination, where you're going. People tell you that this is a good place to travel to work, but you're not sure of where you're going. There's problems with human trafficking, getting into situations that aren't expected. There's also the separation of families, which is very hard on the family unit in Ukraine. And there's also large issues of reintegration. People who have chosen to return to Ukraine, but because they've been gone for so long, they have lost their social network. Often they return, they've lived in a different different circumstances, and returning makes it difficult for other people in Ukraine to understand them. And there's a lot of, very often people will return, spend a few months in Ukraine, and then leave again because they haven't found a place for themselves. So now what is this Commission on Migrants? This is one of our newest commissions, but they've been very active. And what are some of the things that they've done? The first is, before they started actively working, they created a research project. So this was a survey that they worked on with Caritas, the social organization of the church, to research what are the problems and what are the statistics of people who are migrating, who are returning, what are their needs. And this actually research project was heralded by a foundation in Ukraine that's working on migrant issues as well, Open Ukraine. And they've been invited to take part in various roundtables and conferences to talk about the different problems that exist for Ukrainians in migration. And after that, they began to develop, one of the things that they realized that was needed was that the migrant needs to have some attention given to him. People need to understand the psychological aspects of migration and how to approach them pastorally. And so they were able to find a psychologist who works on migrant issues. And with him, they were able to write this book. So here I actually have a copy of it. And the title of the book is Feeling the Heartbeat of the Migrant. And here are a lot of good pastoral suggestions and explanations on how to deal best with migrants and also with the families who get left behind. Another handbook that they put together, which I think is important, is a handbook on legal issues from the main countries where the migrants are traveling to in Europe. And so this was designed for pastors, because very often when somebody is planning to travel abroad, they might go to a pastor and take counsel with them. And so that the pastor would have legal information on hand to tell people where they can turn to if they need it when they travel, what are safe destinations, and answers to various other legal questions. A second thing that I think is important that the Commission on Migrants has been working on is really developing a good network. So they've been working with other civil organizations, working on the issue of migration, and also, again, with Open Ukraine. And I think that they will be, if you look at that fourth point, which is lobby on migration, I think that altogether they're going to be working on introducing various changes in Ukrainian law to help migrants. And the third point is also, I think, very important. It's counseling centers. So they have opened counseling centers in Lviv, in Kyiv, and in Donetsk to help to respond to the need. It's particularly, the counseling centers are for people who are coming back and are having difficulties reintegrating. There's usually a team of people working in the counseling center. It will be a psychologist, a priest, somebody who's an expert on legal issues, to help them sort through the various issues when they return. But they are also open to helping families who've been left behind. So, for example, if the mother has left to go work, they would be available to children and parents, or often maybe the parents have left and have left the children with grandparents. There's a lot of issues that could be counseled in this. Okay. And then my final example is perhaps a bit unusual, but that's why I like to use it, because I think it's a very good example of very clear example of personal initiative. With all the other ministries, it's things that people can think of doing. It's something, heartening, and you're helping people and you feel good about it. But prison ministry is really something, I think, a little bit more radical. And the development of prison ministry, I think, in Ukraine has been very interesting. Again, some of the things that they've worked on has been training for chaplains and volunteers, just as the other commissions have worked on similar programs. But what I really like to talk about is this element of ecumenical and state cooperation. That means cooperation with the government. So again, to set up prison ministry, you have to have a good relationship with the government and with the government departments that work on in prisons, on the issue of prisons in Ukraine. And so they have developed a good working relation. They've also been cooperating with other denominations who are working in the prisons as well. And last June, in fact, they held the first ecumenical pilgrimage to Stawnychy, which is a holy place in Ukraine. And there was a wide range of participation in the pilgrimage. But what I think was most interesting about it is that it was for actual employees who work in the prisons. So we're not talking about, people who've been in prison or being rehabilitated. It's actually people who are working in the prisons. And it's people in the higher up in the departments as well. So these could have been the heads of certain prison colonies in Ukraine. And the theme of the pilgrimage, again, was to look at your own repentance and to understand your own failings and forgiveness that's available to you for your own failings in order to help them to better understand the prisoners who they are ministering to. And I think that this is an interesting example of ways that the church and the state can cooperate, and where the church can help people who are in public service to rediscover the meaning in what they're doing and to rediscover their vocation. And I really think that this is one of the aspects that can have the strongest influence on helping to correct certain areas in Ukraine that aren't working well, such as we mentioned before, the